Hi, everybody. Welcome to Bottom Line with Bob and Kendel Ehrlich. In case you missed Christmas, you still have time for New Year's. For original, unconventional, and inconvenient, Donald Trump and His MAGA Movement by Governor Bob Ehrlich right here. And it's a very important book, so get your friends a New Year's gift.
New Year's, we start a new tradition. A New Year's gift. Well, the book is going very well, as you know, and you've been with me on a number of book signings already. We'll be running around the East Coast. Next couple of months, we were in Naples right before Christmas.
They have a great Republican
speeches.
club there.
Boy, don't they? A lot of ex-Marylanders, former Marylanders there as well. In any event, also Missoni's. Don't forget Missoni's restaurant.
Well, there you can go for your New Year's Eve
and
dinner,
read your book.
and read your book, or
Read a
you
book
can
with
just
good
go for
Italian
that
food.
time and yeah. So go to Missoni's.
We
Have a great meal. Take your friends.
love Missoni's, and mention you heard it on the Bob and Kendall show. Maybe you get a discount. Who knows? Before we get to the end of the year show here, the most important political stories of the year, the 8 stories that we've come up with in any event, I wanted to point out real quick a commentary in the Washington Times, December 20, 2021, obviously last week, by Peter Rosenberger, making the point that comedians are now in the vanguard of the culture wars. They've been thrust into that. Guys like Dave Chappelle getting a lot of ink, being quote-unquote brave. In a sense, it is brave because to the extent you stand up, you practice satire, you actually practice comedy, which is sometimes making fun of people. It's brave these days because the Twitter mobs will come after you, the woke crowd will come after you. It could cost you your career, literally. And a lot of stand-ups have shied away from this culture war as well. So good for Dave Chappelle. No right-winger, by the way. Very few comedians really are, but in any event, good for him. And this is a next present, if you will, phase of the culture war.
I think this is incredibly important to pay attention to. I think humor in a culture is so important.
We love humor.
People laughing,
Yeah.
they say, is great medicine, and I believe that. And I also just think that humor, kind of the upside of social media, there's a lot of humorous things on social media that make people laugh. And I just think it's so important. We're very blessed. Our kids have a great sense of humor. Yeah. I think humor can get you through a lot of rough times.
In politics, President Kennedy, President Reagan used humor brilliantly to disarm their opponents.
And it does that. It actually brings people together if you really think about it. I think one of the biggest things I wanted my kids to have was a really strong, good sense of humor.
Because we like
and
to
they
laugh around here.
Well, they do. And I grew up laughing. I had fun friends.
Your father.
My father. And I just think it's not just a brush over. I think it's really, really important to the culture.
And when we get together with friends like any normal people do.
At a normal time.
We like to laugh. We like to laugh. That's what your friends are about. And we grew up in that era of, oh my God, the Don Rickles and the Dean Martins and the Johnny Carsons.
Well, the
and
comedy shows, and you only had 3 channels, so everybody
Sonny
was
and
watching
Cher.
those shows.
Yeah. We need to return humor to society. The woke stuff is just way out of bounds. And
isn't it terrible to meet somebody without a sense of humor, or that gets so upset about things like the progressives? Everything is serious. Everything is they're making a point about everything. No lightness to them.
Well, the other side of comedy is some of the most important political stories of the year, my dear. And we're going to go through 8 of them that we have chosen. No surprise.
They seem to be
here.
getting worse.
Well,
they're topics we've discussed, but
not all, but most.
Seem
you're right.
To be getting
Number
worse.
1, Vice President under pressure.
Oh, this is a new one.
Unrelenting pressure. Her initial impression has been underwhelming. That laugh has not helped her.
Well, it's inappropriate. She laughs inappropriately.
we all have, particularly public figures, we all have these fallback mechanisms when we're nervous or when we don't know the answer, when we're thinking of an answer. Hers is a laugh.
It is, but it winds up being very inappropriate, or often inappropriate.
Yes, out of context. The resignations, the allegations with respect to her quote-unquote toxic environment in her office have not helped. We've talked about this on the show. You have a little bit different opinion than me, not wholly different. I think the border czar deal was a setup. They wanted to give her something substantive, but they didn't give her any power to do anything. Either that and or she hasn't bothered to really exert leadership. But in my view, if you're the border czar, you have to have the authority and the power to actually do something. The President of the United States has decided not to do anything, quite frankly, at the border. So she's taken a lot of hits for that. Interesting, Henry Cuellar, Democrat, 29th District of Texas, recently, a few weeks ago, said, I've moved on from the VP. Now, this is a Democrat in a border district whose constituents have really suffered because of the chaos at the border. He has heard it. He gets it. He's trying to work with anyone in the administration, and he now has said, I've moved on from the VP. He's working with other officials in the Biden administration to try to actually get something done at the border so that his constituents can actually sleep at night.
Well, that goes to my argument that there are actually people doing something about the border in the administration, but not her.
Lip service.
Well,
the courts made stay in Mexico at least a temporary policy of the Biden administration. As we recall, that had worked under the Trump administration. The first,
but they're not really
President
enforcing
Biden
it.
did. Correct. So
Yeah.
Here we go. That is a huge story, and of course, hope you're sitting down here. To all the criticisms, the response is sexist, racist. People are really tired of this stuff. When you're not doing a good job, it's always the fallback. It's always the hook. They're racist. They're sexist. Enough. It's a little boy who cried wolf.
Also, though, many channels are not, much of the media is just not paying attention to that or not reporting on it anymore.
Yep.
The usual suspects, Fox, Newsmax,
Yep.
others are, but they're not. They're trying to not keep it alive.
The issue itself, you mean?
The issue itself and
yeah.
the pictures say 1,000 words.
Well, the fact that her approval rating is now in the 20s may tell you all you need to know about where she is right now, especially in the context of the border situation she is allegedly in charge of. Second issue, Virginia and the emergence of parent power, an issue that we've discussed. We're celebrating. Parent power is spreading across the country. Woke principles, woke revisionism being taught in our public schools as a function of curriculum and other outlets has been occurring for decades. We ignored it. I'm talking about when we say we, not Republicans, not Democrats, sort of mainstream folks, parents, just normal folks going about their business, sending their kids to school. But then in Virginia, boom, you had a cover-up with regard to a serious criminal allegation. You had the school board trying to limit speech. You had a call for FBI involvement, FBI investigations into parents showing up at school boards. It was
Arresting
a
a
triple wake-up
parent.
call. A triple shot wake-up call. And then a major upset in November in the gubernatorial election in Virginia.
Which then has resulted in many people who probably never thought about running for the school board now running for the school board, thinking about running. It's actually producing some good results, this big pushback,
Parent
and taking
power
control.
Is exerting itself across the country. It is cool to watch. And again, reminder to Republicans, we barely won that race in Virginia, despite a lot of mess ups from the other side. We won that race principally because enough blue parents, Democrat-leaning parents, Democrat parents, liberal-leaning parents said, this is too much. Woke's too much. Progressivism, too much. That's my kid. I have
Right.
invested interest in my kid's education. Sorry, we're drawing the line there, Terry McAuliffe. Enough. Blue-leaning Democrats said enough.
Yeah. Don't get between a mom and her cubs.
You got that right. What was the response from the woke left?
Racist. Shocking.
Yeah, shocking. Third issue, it makes our hearts sink, Afghanistan.
Oh.
We're at a loss for words. Purely planned, poorly executed, poorly explained. Not the way to end 20 years of American blood and money, investments in that godforsaken country. The president clearly did not listen to his generals in the end. We left Americans behind. We left Afghans behind, Afghans who had saved American lives. We left a void in NATO's credibility and America's credibility, now being exploited by China, Russia, and Iran. An absolute dreadful story that is ongoing.
It's ongoing, but it's not being reported. Again, another example of the media just sort of blowing by, all done. And I think the president said we were moving forward.
Turn the page.
And the
was
media
phrase.
has moved forward and are not reporting this story. So people still trapped, still can't get out, and we are not reporting on
And
it.
not an emerging, but a present humanitarian crisis in that godforsaken place. So, shocker, we predicted it. Everyone predicted it. Now, American taxpayer dollars are being used to alleviate, to some extent, this humanitarian crisis because the Taliban is not a government. The Taliban is an ideology. They can't run anything.
Yeah. They're a tribe, really. It's tribal.
It's an army, is what it is. So again, there's a real humanitarian crisis in that country. U.S. taxpayer dollars are now being sent to mitigate this unfolding humanitarian disaster. It is a bad story, like you said, babe. However, the press is not going to report it, and it continues to be a mess. Fourth story: Joe Manchin, moderate. When we first started this show, like others, we said when the new Senate came about 50-50, which is really Democrat control given the vice president's vote, we said the most powerful person in the world is
Joe Manchin.
And Joe Manchin is not a conservative. He's not a secret Republican. He's not a progressive. He's not a woke liberal. He is an actual, honest-to-God, last remaining on earth dinosaur moderate.
And thank goodness for him. Holding firm.
We treat him like a saint.
But you know what?
For St. Joe.
He saved the country.
Well, yeah, so far at least.
So far.
So far.
Keep holding firm, please, Joe.
And the thing is, people have to remember this, babe. As the right celebrates Joe Manchin, he's voted for all the Democratic judges. He's voted for a lot of the Democrat initiatives. He wants to repeal the Trump tax cuts. He is no conservative. But on the big stuff, right, the filibuster, Build Back Better, he stood up.
And I think the personal attacks from the left really don't help them very much. Just
you think?
A hint.
You mean when you get something, you're not supposed to attack the other person?
I just don't think that's very helpful. Very helpful tactic, and I think it makes him hold even firmer.
What's lost, and I saw this in Congress. We saw this. Our friend Tom McMillan. Our friend Tom McMillan, who was a Democrat in a right-leaning district in Arundel County years ago, and Tom was a guest on our show. He's a friend, a moderate Democrat, always stuck between his leadership, left, and his district, right. Joe Manchin has a state that's right, stuck between him and his party leadership. Now, uber left, right, big time left.
More left than it's ever been for him.
Yeah. What used to be the most relevant wing when I was in Congress of the Democratic Party, the Blue Dogs, the moderates, they were the third party in Congress. They were the third party. They were a power center. They helped President Reagan, helped President Bush get a lot of big stuff done. So now, as you said, babe, the personal attacks ensue with intensity, despite the fact he does have a pretty Democrat voting record with regard to other issues. The bottom line is that he's never going to be a progressive. He represents one of the most conservative states in the country, and he has a position of great power given the Senate is presently constituted. And I will say this, we didn't add this as a separate issue, but he has cited Social Security and inflation
as one of his main
reasons for voting against Build Back Better. And inflation is a huge story.
And inflation really hits his state very hard.
Poor state.
It's a poor state, and he is supporting his constituents, which he's supposed to do, by the way.
A regressive tax on people with not a lot of money. And again, the press blows by it. Remember transitory inflation? That was a story this year. Inflation is going to be transitory.
What does that mean?
Well, we know what it means, but they were wrong.
It's here to stay.
Again. Next issue, a border out of control. How many times can we talk about this? But again, it is unrelenting in its negative impacts on the country. Your thoughts?
Well,
Kendel Ehrlich,
we've really
fentanyl and
talked about this an awful lot because it's so important, and it's really an attack on our country and particularly our youth. Overdoses are up to over 200% since 2019, and the power of this drug we can't emphasize more. So it's incredibly important to recognize it has actually lowered our life expectancy because of these overdoses and so much loss of young life. So talk to your kids about this. Recognize that this is one, I think it's the most important issue about the border because they're just walking the fentanyl across the border.
Babe, we've not talked about this. I read this. The counterfeit prescription pills being laced.
Oh no,
now
babe,
with fentanyl.
that is really huge. And they look exactly like a prescribed pill. The cartels have
Well,
perfected this. So any pill, any drug bought on the street can be laced with the fentanyl, and it's completely deadly. Just a speck of the fentanyl can kill, and it does kill. So anything you're getting on the streets, you are just playing Russian roulette these days.
well, and we're playing Russian roulette. We're actually empowering the Mexican cartels and the Chinese.
Oh, the Chinese are sending the ingredients to the cartels to get through Mexico because we were actually effective in stopping some of the packages coming directly through the mail from China in 2018 and 19. So, of course, they find a different way. But make no mistake about it, this is a complete attack on our society. And the Trump administration designated the cartels as terrorist organizations, which allowed for enhanced investigations. And it's so important to do that. And of course, this administration does not do that.
Next issue, defund the police, an unmitigated disaster. Who could see that one coming? This is
A
wholly
concept
predictable.
that I would have never thought in my all my days and all my time in the criminal justice system that anyone would come up with, because those of us that have worked in a system that actually works most of the time believe and know that we need more police in Baltimore City, in Minnesota, in Chicago, in all of these cities that are imploding. They need more police.
Well, we thought it'd be ludicrous for anyone to say it, let alone a political party to adopt it, at least in part. So it's been a disaster replacing police with social workers. As you've correctly pointed out, there are a limited number of situations where social workers can do the job that sometimes police.
Yeah, they
time
can
is taken up
de-escalate
with.
some situations
Sure.
that police could be out doing other things.
Policing.
Right.
So as a result,
Disarming people or
now
something.
we have this backlash. You could have seen this one coming. A backlash in ultra blue cities against woke, Soros-funded prosecutors and, of course, mayors who had been out in the vanguard of this defund the police movement.
Well, they've had elected officials carjacked.
Yeah, well, yeah.
So that
Two
tends to
headlines.
wake people up that may say,
Well-
oh, well, maybe this wasn't a good idea.
Speaking of which, headline this week, House Democrat who co-sponsored bill to replace police with social workers hijacked at gunpoint. And there's another story.
Yeah, a
day or
social
two
worker
later.
doesn't help in that situation.
Now
They
a
can
s-
de-escalate a few situations, but not that one.
Now a second Democrat who pushed for defunding police or reform, quote unquote, has been victimized by criminals in less than 24 hours.
That
Had
is
headlines for this
classic, by
past
the
week.
way. Classic. When it
Classic.
happens to them, oops, wrong thing, but never thinking it through.
Well, don't forget, a
when
lot of
they're-
these folks have 24/7 protection as well.
Interesting.
So again, this hitting now wealthy neighborhoods. You saw the murder in Beverly Hills a few weeks ago. It's hitting elected officials. But most of all, a horrible idea has hit reality. Reality. When you empower criminals, you get what? When you subsidize criminality, you get more criminals.
More of it.
More of it.
In Baltimore, we had that poor police officer who was ambushed. She died Christmas week. Just a terrible story showing exactly what is so horrific about this policy. She had 4 children.
You're at a
on the
loss for
force.
words.
She left a job to go be a Baltimore City police officer to help that city.
You're at a loss for words. Our prayers are with police officers everywhere these days. This is an issue next that we have not talked a lot about. We'll be talking more about in the future because we weren't sure it was a one-cycle story or not. famously, and of course the press has no interest in this story, famously, there was a major uptick among Hispanic voters in the 2020 election for the president. We've now seen the continuation of that in some of these pre-midterm local elections, especially along the border, especially in Texas. So Hispanic realignment, something that your husband has discussed,
For a
has
long
begged
time.
for, has given speeches about.
So why do you think that is?
We just talked about it. Border. It's the border.
I
The
say
left-
also it's jobs.
They're related. Here's the deal. The woke progressive Democrats, the hard left, their political calculation has always been, we need sanctuary cities, we need borderlessness in order to attract Hispanic votes. And for the most part, by the way, Hispanics voted Democrat over the last couple of decades, and they thought there was a relation. Now that borderlessness is totally out of control, they're seeing a big hole in their theory, and as a result, you see this now still partial realignment. So I think progressives are getting this one wrong. Hispanic voters distinguish between dreamers, someone who's brought here as a baby, who's lived their entire life here, who's here, quote unquote, illegally through no fault of his or her own.
Right.
They distinguish that situation from some dude
Coming over the
to
border,
Yeah,
right, illegally.
Yeah. And particularly illegally, and particularly not necessarily with good intent or positive intent. So this has had a huge impact. Here's the other part of your answer, on quality of life
Right.
on the border, quality of life districts. Who lives in a lot of those districts? Hispanics. Who was the first president in a long time to speak up against the Chamber of Commerce, against the borderlessness crowd? You get one guess here. And took a great deal of abuse by both party establishments for speaking up, President Donald Trump. So again, this Hispanic realignment looks to be real. If it is real, it's going to have a huge impact on party realignment, especially Republicans and Democrats as well, obviously, because the Hispanic vote has been a reliable part of the Democrat base for decades now.
Well, as the Republicans are the party of Main Street,
These days,
Hispanics are part of Main Street. They're part of entrepreneurship. They are part of family values.
very conservative
They're
socially.
very conservative socially. So I think that there's a lot of hope in that regard.
So this is a big story, and the press is not going to, and by the way, especially pronounced among Latino voters, and that has the Democrats very upset, very concerned, very focused. Last issue, something we've discussed, it's indelicate in many circles, the silence of the lambs. Oh, I'm sorry, the silence of the liberals. They are the lambs in this case. They're the lambs because they're scared to death of what progressives have been doing to them, which is challenging them in primaries and winning. That's how AOC won, by the way, her first race. So there's a silence of the liberals. Now, we've talked about, you've heard my metaphor in my speeches, between the 20s, Republicans, Democrats, liberals, conservatives over the years, fighting between the 20s. What's the best tax rate? How much government do we need here? What lines are you going to draw in the Middle East? Right, left, sort of defining their debate between the 20s. Lately, with the emergence of true progressivism, you have challenges on the left. You have challenges with respect to free speech, challenges with respect to civil liberties. Democrats were the party of civil liberties until all these mandates came about. You have challenges with respect to patriotic dissent, challenges with respect to pluralism. Now you have the emergence of separatism on the hard left. So again, you have this real dichotomy breaking out on the left between traditional liberals and progressives. As someone who loves our country, who believes in a two-party system, both of us, we hope liberals win this war because it's best for the country. But there's a true culture war going on the left. It's playing out. It'll play out in 2022. It'll play out in 2024. This is real serious.
We need liberals to speak up. The most famous comes to mind, Naomi Wolf.
Yeah. Wow.
She is a liberal, and she
Feminist?
is for free speech. And she gets it. She gets that the country was built on free speech, and she is speaking out, and amen to her.
So, in any event, just some issues that we think define this year. We didn't mention Rittenhouse because that's really part of the whole. I meant to throw it into the whole Defund the Police deal. Mm-hmm. The Rittenhouse scenario came about. He made that trip because of a city out of control as a result of what was going on, defund the police, the riots, the whole 9 yards. So obviously the Rittenhouse case and repercussions thereof and the narrative that followed from the media was a major story this year. Thoughts for you from the Ehrlichs with regard to the major political stories of 2021. My wife accuses me off air of being too negative on the show and sometimes in my speeches. So as a result, next show, we're going to talk about what to look forward to in 2022.
Amen, brother. Thanks. Thanks for
You don't have to call me brother. I'm your husband.
Thanks for taking some advice for 2022. Happy New Year, everybody. Thanks for listening.
Read the book.
Don't forget the book.
Godspeed.